Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Whaling Museum and another Food for Thought. We're very happy to have you here today. The topic of the Food for Thought session today is the newly digitized archives of Nantucket newspapers at the Athenaeum. And to present to you today will be Molly Anderson and Lincoln Thurber. Molly joined the Nantucket Atheneum in May of 2005 and is the 8th director in the 179-year history of the institution. That's a remarkable number. She's responsible for overseeing all aspects of the institution, including library services and programs, finances, management of staff, and building and grounds. Previously, Molly was the assistant head for academic programs at Flint Hill School in Oakton, Virginia. She began her tenure at Flint Hill in 1990 as head librarian. Molly has a BA from Wellesley College and a Master's of Library Science from Columbia University. She has 2 sons, Andrew and Christian. Lincoln J. Thurber III is the head reference librarian at the Nantucket Atheneum. He has worked there since May of 2001. He's currently, as I said, head of a reference and special collections and is overseeing the digitization of the newspaper project as well. Lincoln received his bachelor's degree in English literature from the University of Connecticut and his master's of science in library and information sciences from Simmons College in 2000. When not working, Lincoln is active in the community and encourages the use of the island's historic and natural resources. Please welcome Molly Anderson.
Thank you, and welcome, and a special thanks to the NHA for giving us this opportunity to share what I think is an exciting and new resource for all of you. Lincoln is joining me, and we're here today together to introduce to you what we call our DNA. And we call it that. First of all, it stands for Digitized Newspaper Archives, but we chose the term because it was an easy way to remember that string of words. But also, you know, the human DNA is really a blueprint of how the human body works. And I think in many ways, newspapers are also a blueprint for how a community works and gives you tremendous insights into the magic of being in a community. So we want to share with you our DNA. And I'd like to start with a little bit of background because the Athenaeum, as Melissa says, has been going on for 179 years. And from its very beginnings, we have been collecting newspapers. And from the largest ones to the very smallest ones. Some had very long runs, something like the Enquirer and Mirror has had different iterations and has had a long storied history. Then there were smaller ones, like the very earliest one called the Gazette, which started in 1816 and lasted barely a year. So there's a wide range of newspapers that are included in our archives, and it's gone through, just like books and other forms of information, it's gone through a variety of format changes over time. In the beginning, the Athenaeum just kept hard copies. So if you picture the current Enquirer and Mirror today, you know, it's a fairly large newspaper format called a broadside. And we kept hard copies, and they were put stacked in boxes, eventually in archive boxes. During some of the period when they were being stored, they were actually sent out and put into bound volumes, so you would have a whole year or half a year in these big leather bindings. And those, they take up a tremendous amount of room. Now we have over 200 boxes, archival boxes like this that contain all the newspapers from the 1816 forward. During the 1960s, some of you may remember the addition that was put on the Athenaeum, which is called the Kinet Wing, had in its corner a microfilm room, and it was considered totally state-of-the-art. And there was a whole group of people who were involved in taking various things and going into this secret closet and coming back out with microfilms. And we included the newspapers in some of that microfilming process. But in the late 1980s, the NHA and the Athenaeum got together and decided to combine their collections of newspapers into a single collection, and it was going to be housed at the Athenaeum. So I gather I wasn't there, but there was a parade of newspapers that descended on the Athenaeum, and they were put in closets, under tables, up the stairs. Even the great hall on the stage, there were stacks and stacks and stacks of newspapers. None of it was really organized when it was first delivered. It was just delivered kind of helter-skelter. And you can imagine how heretical this is to librarians to suddenly have all this disorganized information. So we were very fortunate that Lee Ranburn and Chris Turrentine basically took on this project of bringing some order out of this chaos. And they spent 2 years sorting and organizing what turned out to be 24,000 individual newspapers. It was huge, and it was dusty, and I won't say it was a thankless task, because I think many people really were very appreciative in the end, but I don't think many people realized how difficult it was. So that was in the late 80s. In the 90s, there came on the scene a federally funded newspaper project which was designed to microfilm historic newspapers throughout the United States. Very noble enterprise. Unfortunately, it no longer exists, but for a period of time it did. And the Athenaeum took advantage of that and worked with the Boston Public Library to basically take the historic newspaper collection at the time, in the early 90s, and have it microfilmed. It was not happening in the little closet in the Kinet room, which had long disappeared. It was in fact sent up to Boston with under the aegis of the Boston Public Library to be microfilmed. And after that was finished, they sent positive reels of microfilm back here to Nantucket, and the Boston Public Library kept the negative reels, as they're called, in their collection. So, after that initial start in the 90s, the Athenaeum continued to take the newspapers of record, which are basically the large newspaper. In this case, it was the Enquirer and Mirror. And every year we would send out hard copy to commercial company to have it microfilmed. So the microfilm collection continued to grow. And some of you may know it's located on the second floor in the Great Hall, and we have 2 actually microfilm machines that sit there, and people could come and look through the microfilm. Now, this was all wonderful, very helpful news that we had all this on microfilm. However, there is a severe limitation to this archive in microfilm format. and that is that there has never been an index created for that archive. So it really limits your access to the information unless you have the patience of Job. So if you wanted to look up a family member or a historic event, you had no choice but hopefully you could identify approximately when something happened and then start cranking your way page by page through microfilm shots of the newspapers. And it's tedious, and it's actually pretty hard on your eyes to do that for any length of time. And you are more likely than not going to miss a great deal because it's not a comprehensive way to search for the needle in the haystack. So fast forward to the advent of digitization. And in the first decade of this century, digitization was really quickly becoming less expensive to do and easier. And I began to think that this was going to be a really good solution to this huge amount of information, which was rich, rich resource for this island. It would not only help our storage situation because those 200 boxes we have now could, just keep growing and growing and growing, but also digitization allows much easier and comprehensive access to information because it allows you to do what's known as keyword searching. So you can put in the name of your cherished Uncle Barney and be able to immediately get back all the places that Uncle Barney appeared in those newspapers and then go and read the actual articles. It also means that the access is not limited to a person having to come down to the Athenaeum and sit in the corner of the Great Hall, because it'll be on the website and you can do your search you can still come to the Athenaeum and search it there on our website, on our computers, but you can also search on Nantucket, at your home, or if you are off island in New Zealand, you can search the newspaper collection without ever having to come here to do so. So it was a real breakthrough. The opportunity presented itself to take on our archive and convert it to a digitized version. It came with a price tag, however, of course. And so we wrote a grant to CPC, and they very kindly gave us the money to be able to do it. And I had gotten some estimates of what I thought, and I put that into the grant application. And very fortunately, we came in on budget. We used a company called Olive that was actually going to do the digitization. And they also would host it after we finished the project. So the next step was, once we had the money in hand, was to gather up all the negatives, because they do digitization from negatives. So if you were listening carefully, you know the negatives were sitting up in Boston. We contacted Boston Public Library. They were lovely. They didn't charge us for it. They loaned it to us. We sent those negatives, plus the negatives we had from our commercial companies, off to Montreal, which is actually where the digitization took place. So it required a few more custom forms than I had anticipated, but there we go. They came, it took us, we started this whole process in 2010. The negatives went off in 2011. We worked with Olive to create the landing page, which you'll see in a few minutes, plus all the instructions. And we also worked with the Enquirer and Mirror. And we worked out an arrangement with them that we would have our archives go from 1816 through right now, 2008, that the Inquirer and Mirror would keep the most recent 3 years available through their website. And that at the end of each year, we would add another year to our archives. So very soon, you'll see 2009 migrate from the Inky Mirror's website to the Athenaeum's DNA. So if you want very, 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 very current, you need to still contact the I&M. But if you want anything from 3 years on back to 1816, come to the Athenaeum's website. So we launched, after 2 years, basically, the project, we launched this fall our DNA. And I think the result was a really wonderful, rich resource. And I think you'll find, I mean, Lincoln's going to now share with you just a sample of how this works. But I have to confess that it is beware, because it is highly addictive. Once you start opening up this treasure chest, you can't close it again. And it's like the old days when you first got an encyclopedia set or something. You started down one path and you couldn't stand it. Then 2 hours later, you're still there looking up some other random fact that you hadn't even started with. And the best part of it is you can do it at home in your pajamas by going directly to the Athenaeum's website. So please join me in welcoming Lincoln, who's going to take you down on the next part of this journey.
All right, I'm Lincoln Thurber, and I'm the head reference librarian at the Nantucket Atheneum. And I'd like to show you an example of how our DNA works. So let me go to our website, and this is the Athenaeum website that is available to anyone that has a computer or a cell phone or a smartphone or a tablet computer. And our part of the website is here under the Research and Services section. Research and Services includes all the databases that the Nantucket Atheneum has. But the one we're going to focus on today is the second one down, which is the Digital Newspaper Archive. So I'm going to click on that now, and we'll head off to the wonderland of the website. It takes a little bit of time to load up. The website itself is hosted by a company and all of software, but as you can see, you land on a page that has a lot of familiarity with our own website. And the first page you land upon is this sort of browse the archive page. This allows you instant access to newspapers and materials without having to put a search in. And the landing page itself starts off with the most recent the most recent issue that's in the archive. And currently that would be the month of December of 2008. We're going to be adding 2009 in the next few weeks. And so therefore the landing page will land there at that point. But what this provides is it gives you a little calendar here, and it gives you access to dates and month, and it allows you to just click on one of the dates to begin a search. So you don't have to type anything in, and right away you'll be able to look at a newspaper article. And this is how the newspaper appears. This is not translated text. You actually get to see the newspaper as it appeared when it was published. And so therefore it's a very visual medium that we've created here. It allows you to see the front page photo that you might remember. If an article appeared in that certain paper, you might recognize it from looking at that front page. And as you can see, all the articles are here. And each time we move between articles, you can see that they highlight. And when we click on a particular item, it opens up a second page that quickly goes into the article itself, so that you have a larger view of that just a particular article. This allows you to just focus in on that particular article, but it also gives you some tools right away. And the tools are located here up on the top right-hand corner. There's tools for adding an item to a collection, like a little folder that you have during your visit to this particular archive. If you're going to be looking up several articles at once, you can sort of save them temporarily in a little folder. The other option is you can mail the particular article you're looking at. So you can send that to your own email, or you could send that to a friend's email across the country or across the world. So if you're looking for a particular thing, if you're looking up someone's birthday, or the Boy Scout troop that has won an award, you can take that article and send it off to the people that are interested in that. And it also provides this printing icon. From this printing icon, you can do a printout of the article as it appears here. In some cases, it will print out quite well. In other cases, it won't print out quite as well. And we're still working on some of the tools in order to get it to print out well. What we find is that very often, if the article is very long, you need to perhaps switch the orientation or the view of how you look at the article. But in a lot of cases, if it's a sort of a squared off or rectangular article, it will be fit to the page and it will print out. And the other thing you can do is you can actually save the article. Again, this is perhaps a more advanced technique, but if you want to save a particular article onto your computer, it saves it in a HTML format, which is sort of the way the web is created. And it breaks up the article into particular columns and then headlines and things like that. And it replicates it when you try to open it up again. It's a handy tool for researchers. But let me show you a little bit more about the other tools that are available. At this point, we had started from the browsing section of the newspaper. But that's not the only way to view the newspaper. There's a few search methods that you can use. And probably the most common one, if you have a particular item in mind or a particular subject matter or person, is you might want to type that in. And in that case, we would use the advanced search option. Now, the advanced search option is much like how it sounds. It allows you to create a search that has more terms, more sorting, and allows you to define your search a little bit more. The nice thing about our advanced search is right off at the top is the search text area where you can type in. If you just type in your search criteria, we have this page set up so that it will search the entirety of the Enquirer and Mirror run from 1821, when it was the Enquirer, all the way through where the Weekly Mirror was created in 1840s, and all the way up until the combination in 1865 of the two papers, and all the way to 2008. So if you put a search term in on just the advanced search, it will actually allow you to search the entire sort of run of that combined paper. And we've done that to make it so that if you put in a search and you're not familiar with the database, that you'll actually come up with results, that you won't be cut off at 1865, or you won't miss the Weekly Mirror articles, or you won't miss the earliest articles that were written in 1821. So we've sort of created that Enquirer and Mirror section to be searched as a default. Now, let me put in a search term here, and I will put in my name, and we'll see what comes up. And again, we're not putting any date ranges here. We're not putting up any other criteria. We're not looking in certain papers. And as you can see, we got a number of results. There's been some Thurbers on Nantucket, I'm thankful to say, for many years. Not necessarily my side of the family. My side of the family is from Martha's Vineyard. But there have been Thurbers on the island. And As you can see, the format in which the articles are presented in this particular view, when you do a advanced search, is it gives you a small clipping of the headline, generally the headline, and it also includes maybe a little bit of the text. This allows you to quickly scan through items to see if they're meeting your criteria. And they're generally stacked 4 at a time. So you see 4 articles at a time, but if you look here at the top right hand, in this menu bar, you can see that there's many pages of results. So they come 4 at a time, and you can move through the results in small groups. And in each case, you'll be seeing that headline area. Now, along with the headlines, you'll also see which newspaper is identified as sort of the originator. You'll also see the date in which the article originated. In most cases, you'll also see the page. Our newspaper for many years was a 4-page paper, and so you'll see it either on page 1, 2, 3, or 4. Because it was a large broadsheet that was folded, a lot of information was included on each page. And so you'll get the page number, and then you'll also see here a section and often it says none. Because also the unique nature of our paper being a broadsheet for many decades, there was no sections. So the paper was contained within itself. For later on articles, you'll see in some cases that it might be a front page article, or it might be a section with one of the sections that was created in the 20th century. But again, each time you look at one of these particular articles, you'll see the headlines, and let's look at the engagement announcement. And when you click on that particular thumbnail, it will bring up the page. The other thing I'd like to point out is that because it's looking through the entire database, and because it's sort of resolving that newspaper article that might include several sections, it might take a little bit of time between you clicking on the item and this little page here that opens up for each article to be viewed by itself to come up. So we'll give it a little bit of time. What I can tell you is that in most cases, if you refine your search with dates, or if you refine it with other search criteria, the pages resolve slightly more quickly, and also the more time you spend on the database within a certain section of data, the pages will resolve as well a little bit faster. Now, bringing up this article demonstrates another sort of feature of this database, and that is that your search terms are highlighted within the article itself. So since our search was for Thurber, each instance of Thurber in the particular article is highlighted. This is especially handy for long articles and where you're looking to see where your particular search terms have arrived and in what section. And again, each time you open this particular view of the pages, it gives you the ability to save or send or print. In the case of an article like this, where it's short, it prints out very nicely on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. If you have a very long article, there's some tools that we can use to make that viewing a little bit easier. And I'll show a little bit of that in a few moments. But let's do a slightly more complex search by going back to the advanced search. Maybe someone from the audience has a particular search, a subject. Whaling Museum. All right. And do we want to look at the Whaling Museum from a particular date? Anyone? 1970s? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to this search, and we're going to move from search all into search arrange. And when we search a date range, it will ask us for the beginning date and the end date that we want to use. And a beginning date and an end date include a month, a day, and a year. So you have to choose a particular month, a particular day, and a particular year in order for the data to be entered. So we're going to try the 1970s. So I'm going to move over to the little calendar icon, and when I click on it, you can see that the calendar pops up. And we're going to move the date all the way from 1970 in January. And we're going to pick that first date, that number 1. So that allows us to put in that first date range. Now the second date range will work in a similar manner. And in this case, since we want to go to the end of the year, we're going to choose December. And we'll also choose the 31st as our ending date. So therefore, we have this range of dates from 1970, January 1st, all the way until December 31st of 1979. And because we have a 2-word search, whaling museum, what we can do is, in order so that we don't get articles that just include whaling or might just include museum, we're going to put quotation marks around that. And what that allows us to do is we want to have those 2 terms adjacent to one another. And you would use the same thing if you were using a name, like Lincoln Thurber, my name. In order not to get all the articles about Lincoln, a very popular movie right now, and all the articles about Thurbers on the island, by putting quotation marks around it, we're telling it that we want to look for that particular term together. And in this case, I think what we want to do is, it defaults to looking at all the materials that are created, because it says all clippings here. But I think in this case, we'll see if maybe they're just articles. And what this will allow us to do is we'll take out advertisements of perhaps maybe what the speaking engagements or what particular things were happening at the museum as an advertisement, and only look at what articles were written. And so this is this search in area. And I'm just going to click on articles. So once I've put in these criteria, I'm just going to hit the go button. Hopefully. And as you can see, we get results. And what's nice about this is, since we've made it whaling museums as sort of one phrase, it's allowing us to just get a very compact and very literal database pull of all the data that is about articles about the Whaling Museum. And so we have an so again, it takes a few moments for it to come up. But it's, as you can see, it's a good tool in order to sort of refine your search. I saw some of you out there who might have been perhaps using the database early, nodding in agreement. And again, our search terms are placed within there, and then we have the full article right here for us to use. Now at this point, I think what I'd like to show you is just a tiny bit, because I'm sure that when you use a database and you find the information you want, you might want to print it. And of course, that's probably one of the more tricky things with our database, because the article is created as an image file, and because it's sort of assembled, fitting your particular article onto a piece of paper on a standard home printer or maybe an office printer can be a little bit difficult. So I want to show you a little bit about how that process works and what tools are there for you to use. So I'm going to come up here to this print icon. I'm going to click on it. And what this will do is this actually opens sort of another view on the page. And this is sort of how the database imagines that the article will be printed, as closely as possible to how it wants to fit it onto the page. And what you can notice is that it's very, very small. And if we tried to print this out, probably what would happen is that this article would fit maybe up in the top quarter of the piece of paper. And the reason that happens is because it's actually a very long article. It's probably about 14 inches, maybe even 15 inches of page in the actual newspaper. But there's a way to sort of get around that. Probably the easiest way for a home user that might just have a standard printer is we tell the computer here that we want to look at scaling the page, not at all. So at this point, it's trying to scale the image to sort of what it believes is like a page view of it. But if we hit do not scale, as you can see, the text is enormously zoomed in on, and it brings it up to probably a level in which you can read the article. Now, in the case of this, where perhaps the article is maybe a little over a foot, maybe 14 inches long, it will print on 2 pages. At this point, the database can't really do a wraparound that might be sort of more suitable for some people, but at this point, it's continuing with this sort of column format. But since it allows you to actually be able to read the text on the page, it's a good happy medium between having it too small on the page. The other thing I'd like to point out is that we'll just go back down to the bottom of the page. Now, if you have a particular article that isn't just long and skinny, but is perhaps wide, the other tool you can use to perhaps fit your article more easily on the page is to choose a different view. The standard default view very often with most computers and printers is that portrait view, where the 8.5 by 11 is the long way going up and down. But you can actually switch the article if you had a wider article to a landscape view. A landscape view allows the page to be turned, and so if you have a more rectangular article, in conjunction with not fitting it to the page, it will actually expand out to the edges of the page, and it will allow for a more readable output again. Because if we had perhaps a rectangular thing, it still might only fit into that quarter of the page in a very small text. So let's look at perhaps one of the other results. It's a little bit slow. Patience is a virtue, or so I've been told. Now, in some cases, what you'll notice is that some of the articles will be created that do not perhaps fill in all the columns. Perhaps you might come across a particular article where it appears that it started perhaps on the front page, but the inclusion of the additional continued on pages are not occurring. And in that case, what you can do is if you find a particular article like that, you can actually switch over to the entire page view. And what that looks like is if you come over here to view, you can, onto the article view, or the article menu that's here on the top left, we can show the full page view of that article. By seeing the full page view, it also gives you the tools to move between pages. And so from this full page view, you can see perhaps how the article moves across the page or where a particular article might have left off. From there, you can then switch back into the article view again and print out the particular document from the article view, and then switch back in, move 2 pages over to where the continuation of the article is, and then print it out. In most cases, the articles actually do come attached. It's just that in some cases, the ability for the database to interpret where an article begins and ends is sometimes difficult. If it doesn't quite catch that it says continued on page 4, or if that's a little bit blurry because it's actually at the bottom of the page that might be frayed or not in deep color, sometimes they miss some of those attachment points. But this is the way to get around that is to do the whole page view, and that's available for all the articles. And then in some cases, seeing the article in its native format across the entire page is also helpful because you can see what other articles were occurring on the same day. Now there's one other thing I'd like to show you, which is sometimes helpful for the beginning a user of our database. If you come up here to the top, which is our home button, there's an explanation of the materials within this particular database. As Molly highlighted, when we started this project, we were very interested in getting the newspaper of record, the Inquirer and Mirror, into this database. What we found is that because the INM stayed in a 4-page format for so long, that there was actually money that was available for us to add more 19th century newspapers. And so included in this database and accessible are most of the 19th century newspapers that, in fact, all the 19th century newspapers that the Athenaeum was lucky enough to hold on to. And so we have the Nantucket Gazette, and we have many other papers. We have, sconset papers, the various papers that came out and maybe only lasted for a year or two from the 19th century are also included in this database. And you can search those individually. You can search those as a group using some of the tools within the advanced search feature. But what's nice about this particular page is it sort of gives you a chronology of the newspapers that occurred on the island. And that's sometimes very helpful if you're looking for 19th century information, because your only option isn't just using the INM or the Inquirer or the Mirror newspaper. There's a treasure trove of information within some of these smaller newspapers that only lasted for a short amount of time. And you can see the full list of those newspapers here on this home page site. This also includes some information that, about how the INM, through its tortured history, has come together, because the original paper was called The Inquirer. It was also then called just Inquirer. The Weekly Mirror, for a few weeks, was called the Daily Mirror, and it came out daily. And then it switched back into a weekly paper. And so when we were creating this database, the people taking the microfilm and scanning it into there were very confused, because there wasn't 3 newspapers. There was actually 6 newspapers that were created, and they in the combination of those papers that became the INM is what we have today. So we have a little bit of a guide here about exactly the chronology of how the different papers and how long they lasted under what name. You can search all these particular papers individually, but we wanted to include that chronology there for the searchers. The other thing that is available here is, along this top area, is that there's a help and an FAQ. And under the help and FAQ, it will explain in more detail how to create more complex searches. A complex search might include several terms, or it might exclude terms. If you wanted to exclude, say you were looking up information on the Whaling Museum, but you wanted to exclude any mention of a particular boat or a particular artifact, or you wanted articles that included scrimshaw as part of the body of the text, or you wanted to exclude whaling itself from the Whaling Museum information. If you were more interested in maybe trying to find each indication of when portraiture was donated to the Whaling Museum, that's possible by using the advanced search. And I'd recommend that you take a look at the help screen to help you in creating those searches. It also helps you, explains how to create the date range searches so that they work well in conjunction with what you're doing. In the case of the FAQ, we have a lot of information in there about what is included within the database, how it can be used, what sorts of ideas that we use to construct these things, and also it gives you a little bit of insight in why a particular search might fail. The way this database is constructed is that each image was scanned, and then a computer, as well as a little bit of human interaction, looks at the page, reads all the words, puts those into a particular database of words that can be searched. In the case of the very early newspaper, in fact, the very first image of the very first page, there's a big hole in the newspaper. That's the only sort of version of the paper we have, is one in which a little bit of that front page is not included in there. And so they've worked very hard to sort of get a clean image of just that particular page and to pick out the words. But in some cases, not all the words will be picked out, and we have a system in place in which we can call up the company and have additions made or have corrections made. But that's a long process. This is sort of the beginning of this great effort in order to get the Nantucket information out there to the public and out there to the world. And we really hope that people find a lot of satisfaction from searching, whether it's their own family history, whether it be island history, whether it be research for a book or for an article. And in fact, the newspaper itself uses our database to create some of the things that they make. And so we're very pleased, and we're very hopeful that people will find value in this particular database. And we also encourage people that are using it to give us a call. The Nantucket Atheneum reference department is there, whether you email us or call us on the phone, and we can answer your questions, and we can also help you if you're working from home on a particular search. If you want to come down to the library, we'd be most welcome to help you use the database. We have 12 public access computers that are open for people to use. We also have the ability to print, and very often people come in and we can help them with some of their searches, and they can go back to their homes or even just continue to use our facility for their searches. So I want to thank you for coming out. Any questions?
Yes, actually.
Questions, okay.
Here, let me pass the mic around just a second.
I don't need it. I don't need it. Are other libraries throughout the state using the same system?
Other libraries within the state are using it. There are several on the Cape. They had some older newspapers, and they're using Olive as well. And in fact, nationally and internationally, Olive is used both for historic newspapers and current newspapers. And so it's actually something that's come up where there might be more collaboration in the future between all the libraries that are using that. But at this point, most of the libraries are actually providing this service to their newspapers for free, and so that's comforting that this is still free public information.
Alan, I think you had a question?
Thanks, Lincoln. Do you plan to include more recent papers, Town Crier, The Independent, Beacon, so on, as you expand this program?
Well, that becomes an interesting question because it becomes a question of copyright, about who owns the newspaper and who can use it. There's actually, 1923 is a term that's often put about with copyright issues, because that's sort of the last sort of, you could say, point in which, before that point, things would be open to copyright. And so therefore, a lot of the 20th century papers, there would be a legal question. We'd certainly love to have more and more information available for free to the public. And that might be something that we can explore in the future, but that will actually be not only a cost, a price, but there'll be some legal issues as well to make sure that we're doing this properly. Yeah, the hard copies of the papers exist, and also they exist on microfilm. In some cases, for the 20th century papers, you're looking at maybe 3 or 4 years, up to 10 years for some of these papers. But they're slightly easier to search. But certainly the more information we can get up on databases and digitized product, we're very interested in that.
I just wanted to thank the Athenaeum for doing this. I mean, I help researchers all the time, and it is invaluable. I think that research on Nantucket history is now pre-Olive and post-Olive. Anything you've done in the past, you now go back and you check it out on Olive and you find something new and you say, oh, I wish I'd known this before. So it's fantastic. Thank you.
No, we're so thankful for that, and we're really thankful for that feedback, because we really do hope that this will help provide a window into more research and more thorough research. I think in the past there's been Herculean efforts to search the paper and to provide information. And to provide a clear history, and I think this is just another tool that we can use. So that's great.
Lincoln, I agree. It's revolutionized Nantucket research, and we certainly use it all the time at the NHA Research Library. All of our researchers use it, and everyone agrees that that's pre and post Olive is a new era. Do you have plans for a club for consolation for those who spent decades of their lives reading microfilm?
Or perhaps doctor's appointments for their vision.
It is, we've loved working with Olive because it's a wonderful software company. But Olive isn't the only one out there, and right now our relationship with them is as our hoster, but it's a year-to-year relationship. So when you go to other libraries, Olive may not appear. So in the beginning, we were like calling it Olive, but over time we realized that that's probably, we should not get ourselves wedded to Olive. But whatever way you demark the post and pre, that's fine. But Olive's interesting company if you have a chance to do some research on it. Okay, well, Olive may not be there forever, so it probably shouldn't get too attached to Miss Olive. Miss Olive, yeah.
Perhaps it should be check the DNA. Other questions in the back? Hold on.
In terms of photography and illustrations, that sort of thing, that aren't necessarily, that are related to an article, but they're not necessarily keyed to it in the text, how do you search for that other than just the full page search?
Well, there are ways to look up the photos, and I think in most cases they've tried very hard. If there's if there's an illustration there, that it gets described in simple terms. Unfortunately, we as islanders could probably look at an image and tell you exactly where it occurred, what it is. So in some cases, Olive has only been able to determine that it's perhaps a man on the page, or if there's a description below it, they've certainly done a full word capture of the description. But photos will probably continue to be a little bit difficult for the system, just simply because of the way it's created. Now, we do have ways in which we can update the database, and that's certainly something we can look more closely into to make sure that perhaps illustrations and photos have perhaps a richer sort of tags so that they're more searchable. But there is a way to just search for images.
Who does the backup of this database? Do you also do your backup?
Yeah, they host it, they have backup, there's redundancy. The Athenaeum itself, we own TIFF image files of the database. And so therefore, even if we were to stop our relationship with Olive or anything like that, we actually have this archive of the TIFF images. And so therefore, any switch or move to a different way of providing this information would be.
Out of curiosity, this is probably a way technical question. Do you have any idea about the size in gigabytes of this whole database?
I'm not sure what the full, what it is we have several 500 gig drives. It is actually massive.
We encounter this problem on our server once the capacity grows, because images are getting bigger and bigger, and then the capacity grows on the server, and then hosting becomes a problem. And then expanding the server capacity can actually add to the cost.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why we chose to do an outside service. When we were first looking at how to host a database, how to do a digitized collection, indexing, all these questions, where does the data sit? How does it run? Who's maintaining it? It's at that point in which a small library like ourselves, we look towards having an outside company worry about those things.
Oh, one more question in the back.
You can search directly for advertisements. Advertisements are treated in the same way in which articles are. All the words are OCR, object character recognition, scanned. They're checked. So it is possible if you're looking for dry goods. I haven't done too many searches in that, so perhaps some other researchers out there might have more experience with that. But as it stands now, if there's text within that advertisement, which often happens in the 19th century, that is available to you. The entire page was scanned, and all of the text is part of that database.
With Lincoln, on behalf of the Nantucket Atheneum, they will be stored in climate-controlled and humidity conditions at the storage facility of the NAJ at 89 Bartlett, and we're looking forward to that. Every year, our dear colleagues will bring boxes.
It's wonderful because, as I referred to when I was giving you background, there's been this constant how to do it with NHA and the Athenaeum. And so they brought copies over to us, we sorted them, here we are. But at this point in the library world, there is a reluctance to give up all paper, full stop. And I support
Currently, we have all physical copies. We have duplicates because of the way it was actually held. Actually, and we continue to collect newspapers. Every week, we collect 2 copies of the local newspaper, and we store them. And we collect 2 copies simply because we need that sort of redundancy in order to make sure that we have a complete and final year of newspapers. Okay, yep. Yep. No, we keep it, and they're treasured. They're truly treasured because they're holding the physical paper is wonderful. If you haven't had the sort of experience of seeing the 19th century papers and the large sheets that you could almost sleep under, it's wonderful.
Are there any final questions? Well, thank you all. Thank you, Lincoln and Molly.
Thank you all.
And just to plant a seed, I can see how you could use the DNA to study for History Quiz Bowl, which is happening at the NHA on March 2nd. And we still have room for teams. So if you're thinking about joining the competition, this might be a good resource to check out in your studies. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.